Welcome to the Meditation Conversation, a podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm joined by Angel Pretot. Angel is a French learning coach and online entrepreneur, and through his coaching and courses, he helps English speakers learn French fast, become fluent, and live their best international life. After a master's degree and 19 years of teaching and coaching French learners, he's still obsessed with improving the methods he uses. He loves seeing his students learn faster and better and create wonderful lives for themselves. He lives in Vienna, Austria, and he has a very mindful approach to his teaching, which is why he's here today. I can't wait to talk about the intersection of language learning with meditation. So welcome, Angel.
That's right.
Is
Thank
that
you for
is
having
that
me,
better?
Kara. That was
Angel?
perfect. Yes,
Okay.
Angel. That's awesome. You're great at French.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. I did take 2 years of French in high school, and I lived in Italy for 4 years, and one of my closest friends there is from Paris. And so we often spoke in English or in
Right.
Italian, but mostly English. But I would always make jokes about like that I could speak French because I'd take words that are English but sound
Mhm.
French, like garage or baguette or
Yes.
and I'd say, "See, I can speak French." But anyway, it's a beautiful language, and I'm really excited that you're here today. So, can you start by talking a little bit about your background?
Yes. Thank you for having me. Well, you summarized my background pretty well in the introduction. So, what can I say more? I have lived in France for the first 25 years of my life. I am French. I was raised monolingual. So, the English that you hear right now, I learned it. I did learn it quite young because in France, everybody has to take English in school. So that's what I did. And I did quite well with it. So I was able to speak English properly by the age of 15. But I do like to insist that I did learn English and that I'm not a native bilingual. So I myself am the proof that you can actually learn a language and be fluent in it without actually ever living in a country where that language is spoken. I mean, I've never spent more than 3 weeks at a time in an English speaking country.
Wow. So, what can you say about that? About how it is possible to become fluent without really immersing yourself in the culture in a place where you're hearing it all the time.
Right. I wouldn't say without immersing yourself. I
Okay.
think we do have a misconception, and probably that comes from the past. Like before the internet, it was just not as easy to immerse yourself in another language or another culture without physically going there. But nowadays, we have so many resources that it's actually pretty easy to go to a country and not immerse yourself at all, which I
Yeah.
have been guilty of. I lived first 5 years in Austria and then I moved to Germany and I thought to myself, oh, I'm moving to Berlin. I'm going to finally learn the right German, the German that they speak in Germany, the weird Austrian variant. And it didn't happen at all. I
Is
went
that
to,
because you were around a lot of French-speaking people or what?
no, mostly English speaking people. I mean,
Eng
I went to work in a startup where even the leadership didn't speak German. And my ex-wife, even though she was German, she just didn't want to speak German to anyone. She spoke English all the time, including with me. So it's the idea that being in the country equals being immersed in the language is just completely divorced now. It's no longer an equivalence like that. You can absolutely sit where you are and immerse yourself in any culture of any language that you want to learn, provided that it's a language large enough to have content on the internet.
Mhm.
For French, of course, it's no problem. If you pick a very small minority language that has very few speakers, of course, it's harder.
Right. So that immersion is key to
Yes,
becoming fluent.
yes. It's one of
Yeah.
the 4 steps uh, in the 4 step system. I like to explain how to learn a language with 4 steps. Or immersion is step number 3. And
Okay.
so if you want, I can go over the 4 steps.
Please.
I like to say it SAIS because that's like the verb to know in French. Like I know is je sais. That's how
Ah,
you remember it. selection, activation, immersion, and safe practice. So selection is really a pillar that most methods miss. Basically, it's really important to select what and learn what is relevant to you. Tim Ferriss said it's not about how you learn, it's about what you learn. He's famous for having learned Japanese really fast from being an English speaker. And when he did it, he said that, yeah, it's all about selecting what is important, which words are important, what kind of turns of phrases are important. And one thing that I do in my work, being a coach and working a lot one-on-one with people, and even in my group program, I insist on doing a lot of one-on-one, just one student has the hot seat and the others listen, basically, uh, because it's really important to identify what makes sense for you to learn. And if you're a doctor and you're going to go do charity work in Africa, you're going to learn a completely different French than if you're an international lawyer and you're only ever going to deal with big corporations, speaking
That
about
is
law, right?
Yes, I love that because it really, I also have been a foreign language learner because of living in Italy. And because I was immersed in the culture to some extent. I mean, I did have a lot of expat friends. I spoke English a lot, but I also had to speak Italian every day.
Right.
But I didn't take that approach. This is new to me. That method is new to me, but it really was like in trying to learn it. I mean, I spent all 4 years really trying to learn
Right.
it, taking private lessons, group lessons, doing language exchanges, hosting language exchanges where we would speak
Mhm.
English half the time and Italian half the time, and you'd always have native speakers of each. But I tried to learn the whole world.
Right.
And Italian, I don't know if it's similar to French in this way. I know that the Romance languages are very similar
Mhm.
to each other, but it's a lot. Like, they have,
Right.
7 past tenses or something. So you would
Yeah.
use a different past tense for the ancient past than you would
Mhm.
use for something that happened last year.
Right.
And
It's similar in French, yes.
yeah, so it's like just, you take it step by step, but it's also like not being intentional about what it is
Right.
that you're wanting to learn. That would have been a
Yes.
really great way to approach it.
I mean, to be honest, that's also how I learned all the languages that I learned them like you learn Italian. It works this way, but like you said, it's years and years and years of sustained effort. And
Yeah.
then I became a coach and I was like, okay, what can I do to optimize the process and to just get
Yeah.
my clients the result as fast as it gets because they don't have the time. They have a career, they are adults, they have families, and to just, have other things to do than sit in the French class forever. It's just
Right.
not going to
Yeah.
work this way for them. We have to find something better.
Right, right. So
Yeah.
selection is S
Yes.
and then
Then it's
A?
A, the A is for activation. And this is something you're going to be familiar with if you know about meditation and manifesting and things like that. You know that when you are seeking to bring something in your life through manifestation, you will use a lot of anchors. You will seek to define precisely. I mean, I guess defining would be rather the selection, but then you'll use anchors and you'll visualize what you want and things like that. That corresponds to activation, the activation step. With French, the activation step can sometimes look like a grammar lesson. So very often that's what happens when the client comes in class with me and I introduce a new concept, or they will ask me a question saying, oh, how can I say this or that? And then that will trigger a little, lesson on how to say this and that and what kind of things you can use the same pattern for. So that pertains to activation. This is among the things that have been selected that you need to learn. Now you choose a few things and you actually quote unquote learn them, but you know that you can't remember everything you learn once, right? So that's
Mhm.
why the other two steps are here. So we know
Okay.
step number 3 is immersion. We've already spoken about that. I recommend immersing with things that you enjoy. YouTube is full of French channels about everything you can think of. And I know about that because I spent the last 7 years listing them and categorizing them so that I can handpick them for my clients. So just YouTube alone could do this work. But of course, there's so much more. There's Netflix, there's podcasts. A lot of people have French TV. If you have cable TV, even in the US, you have some French channels. So there's really like an endless list of things that you can use to immerse yourself. You need to choose the stuff that keeps you motivated and that you enjoy. So it can be in relation with your hobbies, with your profession, or with really anything that, floats your boat, as we would
Mm-hmm.
say. And if you do all three of those pillars very well, you will become very competent at understanding the French language or the language that you're learning. But it will not be enough to make you competent at speaking or producing that language. That is why we have the fourth pillar, which is S, and it's safe practice. Now, it could be just practice, and that would be practically self-explanatory, right? Of course, you cannot do anything that you haven't practiced. Practice makes perfect, or practice makes permanent, as they say. So that's super important for obvious reasons. I like to add safe practice, not just to complete my acronym, but also because it is absolutely critical to be in a space where you feel safe enough to quote unquote take risks. I don't really like the idea of taking risks. The idea is actually to remove the risk. Like if you are on a Zoom call with me, you can say anything and nothing bad will happen to you. That's really one of the cornerstone of my coaching practice. Like there is nothing that you can say on those calls that will have any kind of bad consequences. Worst case scenario, we will all laugh together because you said something really funny or maybe really offensive, but it doesn't matter because you didn't have a bad intent, right? And it's
Yeah.
better that you say the offensive thing on the Zoom call with me than next week with your client or your patient or whoever it is that you're speaking French with in real life. So yeah, those are the four pillars: selection, activation, immersion, and safe practice.
I love it. And I love that idea of safe practice too, where you're in like a nurturing environment
Yes.
and people are going to be not only like correcting you,
Mhm.
but also meeting you halfway.
Right.
That's one of the things as having the experience of being the foreign speaker where people will ask me like, "Oh, are you fluent in Italian?" I'm like, "No, I'm not fluent." My ability to speak Italian depends on how generous the listener is. You know,
Right.
how much are they willing to flex their understanding of what I'm trying to
Mhm.
say to be
Yes.
able to meet me where what I'm saying can make sense.
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. That's also an important part of my coaching practice, even though it's only on my side, so I don't speak so much about it. But yes, meeting the learner where they're at is absolutely critical. And that's also part of the reasons why I decided 7 years ago that I would specialize in teaching English speakers and I stopped teaching German speakers or people who did not speak English. You don't have to be a native English speaker to work with me, but you have to at least speak English
Mhm.
fluently. So if it's your second language, it's okay. In
Yeah.
fact, it's better for you because you already have the experience of learning another language. But because it's so important for me to understand how the mind of the person works and how it works in their language, I found out that I can't do that with several languages.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So, how does meditation play into learning a language? Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, absolutely. So meditation is something I brought into my practice. And if you go to my YouTube channel, there is a playlist with all the meditation tracks that I've
What is
created.
your
And
YouTube channel?
oh, it's at French Fluency. In fact, that's my handle on all the social media. If you type my name on YouTube, you'll also find me, Angel
Okay.
Pretot, but the handle is at French Fluency. And my website is frenchfluency.net.
Okay.
So it's consistent like that. And
And we'll
there's
have
a,
all that in the show notes, but just in
thank
case
you.
anybody's just listening.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a playlist with the meditation tracks that I have created. Also in my group program, there's a workshop, which is energy clearing for French learning.
I want
And,
to talk
and
about that. I want to know what the importance of energy clearing is, but please continue.
right. And it basically, like, yeah, I guess I can make a small summary on all of that and we can branch out in the details. Um, the reason why I brought that in is because I started practicing it for myself because I was building my business and I got into all of the personal development that you can do to be successful at building a business. So that included meditation, manifestation, the law of attraction, and all of that. And I found out that you can use meditation for absolutely anything. One person that has inspired me so much with creating my meditation track is Bert Coleman, who created the quantum jumping meditation system or method, which is itself sort of a spin-off of the Silva method. So I absolutely love the Silva method as well. And I love what Bert Coleman did, spinning it off to really make it very playful and very efficient at the same time, where you basically go to an alternate universe and you meet your twin self who has the skill or the quality that you want to embody. And then you merge with that twin self that allows you to bring the quality back into this world. Uh,
Oh,
it's
that's
my favorite
pretty.
technique
I
ever.
love that. So is that because that to me seems like if you have a client who is not into meditation at all, that might be a big leap in terms of like belief construct and what
Right.
they even believe is possible. But so I'm curious, like how open have people been to that type of concept?
If people are not open to it at all, I don't try to force it on them because I think it's
Yeah.
counterproductive. I am perfectly able to do my coaching without ever having
Hmm.
the clients using these resources, but they help if you can use them. Like if you can suspend your disbelief long enough to meditate to the meditation track,
Hmm.
then it will greatly help, mostly because people have a lot of anxiety and
Hmm.
it's unnatural to
Hmm.
speak a foreign language, whether you want it or not. Unless you're very practiced, it's not natural to speak a foreign language.
Hmm.
So being able to lower your brain waves and lower your guard, so to speak, it helps tremendously with being able to access your capacity to speak.
Hmm.
At any point, you have more unconscious capacity to speak than conscious capacity.
Hmm.
I like to illustrate that with a bit of a silly dentist story where once I was at the dentist in Berlin and I had not noticed, but I was clenching my teeth on her finger and she said something to me. And so I relaxed my jaw. And only after I had already complied, I heard that she had said, "Don't bite me," in German,
Oh,
meaning that I'm able to take in the command and physically do all the things that are required before I consciously understand.
yeah.
So
Oh, that's
imagine what that
interesting.
means for how much you know that you are not conscious that you know.
That's really interesting, and that is I love that story, and it reminds me too of when I lived in Bologna, and like I've mentioned, I tried really hard to master that language. I didn't come close to mastering it, but to be able to confidently speak it because you make that point too, you can understand it,
Hmm.
but speaking it is different, and I don't know, I imagine maybe some people have a strength where it's like, "Oh, speaking's a lot easier than reading it or understanding it," but, like, for actually hearing it and comprehending was always the hardest for me if somebody's a native speaker is speaking to me, and then second to that was speaking it, but reading it, I got a lot easier and quicker.
Hmm.
But I was always taking classes, I was always doing, like, self-study things, I really worked hard. This was,
Yes.
like, pre-meditation days too, so I
Hmm.
didn't really know much about consciousness at that time. But I would always go home back to America in the summer for, like, 4 or 5 weeks, and I remember coming back after I'd been on break and I was like, "Okay, here we go. We're back in Italy, and I'm gonna have to start flexing these Italian skills again, and
Yes.
am I gonna be starting over?" I was just, like, very curious, like, how much did I lose because I didn't work on it at all for all that time? And I think I'd only been back for, like, 1 or 2 days, and I woke up from a dream, and I'd been speaking Italian in my dream,
Yes.
and I was like, "Yes!
It's back.
I'm dreaming about it." And I was like, that's gotta be a good sign because I'm not
Yes.
consciously it was enough a part of me that it had come into my subconscious and I could actually create a
Hmm.
dream where I
Yes.
was speaking it and hearing it and I was immersed in it. And that again, it fascinated me and it gave me confidence that I was like, well, I must not have lost as much as I thought I did. You know?
Yes. I mean, and often you can actually speak Italian or French or whichever language you're learning in your dream better than you can when you're awake, which
Yeah.
also speaks to the role of the unconscious versus your conscious awareness. Because, like, what? Like, if you're not there, you can do it better.
Right.
It's a bit frustrating, but also I think it's a good information to have.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to that energy clearing because
Yes.
that's fascinating. So, what role does energy clearing play in learning a language?
So I noticed also over my own quest for understanding energy and how energy clearing works, and also working with my clients, that a lot of people have had terrible experiences, either with the language, with the French, or with learning, even in their own life. I mean, every week I hear some horror stories about how teachers mistreated my students now who are adults, but how they were mistreated as children. And it seems to be like international teacher hobby to just damage the
Wound
kids
people,
somehow.
traumatize them.
Yes. And so there's that which is related to being in school or learning a language as an adult, or also the interactions that you have had with the language or with the speakers or the people in general that you associate with the language. And if it's not, you can bet your ancestors have, because in my energy clearing workshop, you know, you can watch it if you're part of my group program. I've put some maps, and there isn't a single place on earth that the French haven't gone and waged war at some point of history.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Like if you are part of any kind of modern world, which is pretty much anywhere, right? Like unless you're part of a tribe that hasn't not been contacted, in which case you're definitely not hearing this. If you're hearing this, you can be sure at some point some of your ancestors have been at war against the French. And even if they are French themselves, because they used to wage war against each other before it was, you know, the country as we know it now. So someone in your family tree has had a problem with the French.
Hmm.
And very often it is in your lifetime. Like I had one of my students who was a nurse. He was from Australia. And he, during that workshop, it's actually recorded because he had the aha moment on the workshops live. He realized that when he was 12, the French had been practicing their nuclear weapons close enough to Australia. Yeah, we'd like to explode bombs in the Pacific at some point. Sorry about that. And as a result, people were having cancer that they shouldn't be having. And because he was a nurse, he was actually seeing those cases. And well, actually, he wasn't a nurse at the time. He was 12. So he had seen those cases. But, you know, then it continued, right? It's not something that stops as soon as we said, oh, we're going to stop exploding bombs. No, like the damage stays. So he remembered being extremely angry at the French when he realized that it's the French nuclear trials that had caused those health problems that he now had to deal with in his patients. And it was during his lifetime. So when I say like at some point somewhere
Yeah.
the French have been messing up with your family tree, it might even have been you. And he
Oh.
had completely blocked it out because at that point he was maybe 50 or so years old.
Mm.
And he just had forgotten, but it's here in your energy somewhere if you don't clear it. So that is why I do energy clearing.
That's fascinating. I mean, the care and the intentionality of your method that goes so far beyond, okay, here are some verbs that you need to learn how to, and, or here are the, 5 different ways that you can say, oh, or the
Right.
5 different meanings of the word oh, you know. That blows my mind. I don't know how you guys know the difference between water and what are all the other O words? Like,
We have water, and then there's a preposition which is O, and then there's O which means high. And no one has asked me this question before, interestingly. I'm sure there's more. We
and
know
well,
it
I mean,
from context, but yeah,
well,
that's
and
also
then
spelled differently.
but there's like also O and then like ooh, which is different. It seems like it sounds very different to you guys, to
Hmm.
French speakers, and it doesn't really sound different to me. So there's O and then there's ooh and then there's like there are little variations where I'm like, those are different
Yes.
words. That's the same sound. You
I
know?
do actually insist on pronunciation quite a bit in my coaching practice. There's a pronunciation workshop that's in the member zone. Every time I have a new client, almost every time, some people are really good to start with, but most people aren't. So when I work one-on-one with someone, I will make personalized tongue twisters. I will identify which words and which sounds are difficult for them to pronounce and just make them an audio file to practice. And then
Mhm.
every group class, we end up discussing, okay, like this particular word, that's how you pronounce it. And you have to like shape your mouth this way or that way to be able to make the French
Yeah.
sound. Yeah, it's part of
Well,
the job.
the care and the intentionality and the, I mean, even going into the trauma and the healing and trying to clear that out to make it as easy as possible. This is really unique and such a high vibration approach,
Right.
of like helpfulness way beyond language, which is just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Bravo.
also thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It's also understanding that learning a language is a personal growth journey. Like you will be a different person at the end than you are at the beginning. At the very least, you'll be a person with like a different coat of what you can do.
Hmm.
And I like to really insist that it's important to understand that you'll be the same person with some extra skills. Also because there is I don't know if they still do that. I think some people still do it. There is a trend in language learning where at some point they realize that the person's ego and their awareness of who they are was getting in the way of them learning the language because they couldn't identify with the new language that they were learning. It was a good observation, and that is also something you can combat with, for example, those quantum jumping tracks that I have on my channel. And there are like different ways to combat this that I have found that are less damaging than the solution that they had found. Because what they did were like, oh, well, okay, so the person that you are now cannot learn the language. So what we're going to do is that when you're in the language class, you pretend to be a different person. It was
Oh,
super fashionable at some point. And the thing is, it gives great results, quote unquote, because the people who were pretending to be someone else just for the Italian class or the French class or the whatever class were doing amazing in the class. They had great results on the exams, perfect, mission accomplished. Then they left and they were never able to speak a word in their real life when they became the actual person with which they are again.
no. They
And
fractalized.
right, so
Yeah.
so when I realized that was happening, I was like, ah, yeah, it makes sense because you're pretending to be someone different, and as soon as you stop pretending, it does not happen anymore.
Yeah. That's
So
fascinating.
So that's why I
Wow.
explored, using meditation and visualizing your future self, where you're just you in 1 year, where now you can speak French and say the American lady who's very, very educated, and you have your profession and your life and your hobbies and so on, and you can go do all of that in French and in a
Mhm.
French speaking context. And it's really
Right.
super important to not dissociate the two. Like you
Yeah.
have to, it's the basic of manifesting, to be honest. That's how you manifest. See
Yeah.
yourself as the person that you will be, right?
Yeah.
Don't spin another identity. That
Right.
doesn't work.
Especially if you are like such as you, where you're evolving yourself and like that is
Yes.
important to you in terms of just continuing to grow as a person, as a spirit. It's like you don't want to nurture in somebody else, like pretend that you're
Mhm.
not you. You completely disassociate from you and become somebody different and reject that person. It's like, no, we
Right.
actually want to integrate even
Yes.
beyond language learning, but it's all about integrating the different parts of us to be more whole. So,
Yes.
well, talk to us about neurodiversity and different learning styles. How does that we have touched on this a little bit, but is there more to that in terms of your approach and how you deal
Yes.
with that?
There is definitely it's something that I'm still exploring. So I'm trying to find precisely what pertains to neurodiversity. And I'm still learning about this. It's something that we know hardly anything about. You can read every book that has been written about neurodiversity. You will not come up with a protocol for learning a language successfully with your, even if you're a language learning expert like I am, it's completely unexplored. But recently I've come to identify that my neurotype is what we call ODHD. So it's a crossover between autism and ADHD. So because of that, my brain works quite differently from the majority of the people. And I have observed that it seems, even though this neurotype is rather rare, it does seem that a lot of my clients do have a similar neurotype. And it makes sense because if I find the way that it makes sense to me, it makes sense that it also makes sense to them. The people of this neurotype struggle extremely hard. Honestly, I don't know if there's anyone who doesn't struggle with that, but with language learning as it is, or language as it is taught traditionally, like language learning apps have terrible outcomes. Language
Really?
schools have terrible outcomes. They can all be part of a successful process, but alone they can't do much.
Okay.
So, I mean, I have never met someone who has told me, oh, yeah, I did Duolingo for 2 years and now I'm fluent.
Right.
despite
Yeah.
the fact that it is what they claim on their website. So there's
Really.
a disconnect here, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I don't know if they still do that. I should go to their website and check. But once I was on their website and they have a link that says, we have proof that it works. And when you click on that link, you have a list of studies that it's about like memory retention rate after spaced repetition and whatnot. Like, I don't know what this proves. I mean, for me, the proof would be someone coming and saying that they did it.
Right. Yeah, and again, it goes back to, like, are you fluent? Like, are you
Yes.
comfortable being immersed in that environment? Can you stay afloat when you're
Yes.
swimming in a French
Yes.
language environment, or do you sink? And,
Yes.
it's
Absolutely.
so much of it is psychological where, like, you get because you can be immersed in, like, a French environment and then just it's like you just suddenly it's very hard, it's very hard, it's very hard, and then you just
Yes.
decide, like, "I'm not doing it, I can't do it," and it's just like this wall goes up,
Yeah.
and likewise, it can be that you find yourself in that flow, and it's like, "Oh my gosh, look, I'm doing it," and
Hmm.
but there is such a psychological element to it. It's not
Yeah.
just about memorization, like to your point.
Absolutely. You can circle back to the four pillars or the four steps that I had at the beginning. Pretty much every method that you can find will miss at least one of the four steps.
Mhm.
Most methods do miss the first one, which, if you miss the first one, but you have all the other three, basically it will just be very long.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
if you miss the second one, I don't know, because it's the one that's least missed, I think.
Okay.
You have to like teach something, right, at some point, so that which
Yeah.
pertains to activation. If you miss immersions, you'll have people who will get, like if you have the first two, and the last one, you miss immersion, you get people who get really good at drills and filling out grammar exercises.
Yeah.
Not exactly what you want speaking a language. If you miss the last one, you best case scenario get people who are good at understanding the language, not speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why there are four.
Right,
You want them
right.
all.
Yeah. Well, this is fascinating. I have learned so much and really appreciate your approach. I hope that we see over time more people taking this kind of approach their in all of their endeavors, whether because again, like you're doing this with language and it could be really easy to just be like, well, here's a worksheet. But again, you're going so deep with people to clear things out and to work with them on an individual level and to really like help things get clicked in based on what is most important for them. But again, I'm like blown away that you're even like clearing things out, working with traumas, even like taking that into account. That could be a barrier for people. That's
Yes.
fascinating. But I
Yeah, I,
mean,
I spent many years just trying to find out how could I make the method better for
yeah,
the people I work with. So yeah, that's the result.
it really feels like it's a prediction or a glimmer of like what the future could be like for humanity as more and more people take their own evolution seriously and they do their
Yes.
own inner work and then they take into their profession that and they hold that up and work with people from that platform, which is what you're doing. But it's like, imagine if everybody who is holding jobs like that are diverse and not directly related to helping people work with their trauma or helping them to evolve, to become more mindful, to become more intentional, to manifest what they want, but they're fitting it into their work and people are
Right.
healing even when they're trying to do something else. I mean, it's like that would be an amazing future for humanity.
Yes. I mean, one way or another, everything is connected. So the more holistic your approach, the more likely you are to be successful with anything that you're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for being a pioneer and for
Welcome.
helping so many people. Tell us again how people can connect with you.
Yes, so you can find me on all the big social media platform with the handle at French Fluency. That includes YouTube. And you can find my website, frenchfluency.net. You will find details of my coaching programs over there. I am always available to have a call with you if you're interested in working with me, either one-on-one or in the group program. I just, love to connect with people and hear what their journey was like, what they struggle with, and if I can help them. So yeah, I'm always remaining available. It's called a application call, right? But basically, it's a free call that you can book from my website, and and see if we can work together.
Wonderful.
Yes, that's it basically. And if you have any questions, there's a contact form on my website. Every video has a comment section. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any question.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Angel. Say it again.
Angel.
Angel.
Yeah, that is a tongue twister in and of itself.
Angel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you
I've
for
loved
having me.
talking to you.